Sometimes the most frightening stories don't come from shadows or dark alleys. They come from places that should feel safe. A crowded shopping mall, bright lights, security cameras watching every corner. In 2022, one of those cameras in Palawan captured something that, at first, looked ordinary. A young woman in an orange shirt, carrying a black backpack, walked through the entrance of Robinson's Mall. Her name was Jovelyn Galleno. But what makes this footage disturbing isn't what we see, it's what we don't. Jovelyn is caught on camera walking in, and then she's never seen leaving. For many in the Philippines, the case struck a deeper nerve. Because for years, there had been whispers, urban legends about malls with hidden basements, secret passageways where young women are abducted and trafficked. It begins on August 5, 2022, in Palawan. A criminology student, 22-year-old Jovelyn Galleno, clocks out of her shift at Robinson's Mall at 6:30 p.m. She calls her sister, Jocelyn, on her way out. It's a normal conversation, nothing strange. But by 8:55 p.m., Jocelyn texts her again. "Where are you?" No reply. At 10:27 p.m., Jocelyn tries calling. The phone rings, but no one answers. That was the last time anyone in the Galleno family would ever hear from Jovelyn. At first, this looks like a typical missing persons case. Maybe she stayed late with friends. Maybe her phone died. But very quickly, her family begins to suspect something darker. Within days, a reward is offered for any information about the young student's whereabouts. And immediately, suspicion falls on one place, the mall where she worked. Because when investigators reviewed CCTV, they saw something disturbing. There was footage of Jovelyn, wearing an orange shirt and carrying a backpack, entering the mall at around 9 a.m., but no footage of her ever leaving it. You know how there's this creepy urban legend in the Philippines about some malls having hidden basements where women get trafficked? Well, when Jovelyn went missing, that's all anyone could talk about. The stories about Robinson's malls got especially wild. People were saying there were trapdoors in the fitting rooms that would just swallow women whole, dropping them into some underground lair. Some claimed the mall owner's secret mutant son, a half-man, half-snake, lived down there, and that the slithery R in the logo was a clue. Others swore the mirrors were actually one-way windows, so this thing could watch and pick its next victim. Of course, the mall owners denied this outright, but for Jovelyn's family, this wasn't about myths. This was about cold, hard reality. Their daughter had vanished into thin air. Jovelyn never came out. So where was she? As the weeks passed, the focus began to shift from supernatural myths to a more earthly and perhaps more plausible motive. By August 16th, a new theory was gaining traction online. Rumors swirled that Jovelyn's disappearance was linked to a supposed romantic involvement with a married man. The situation became significantly more complex when it was revealed the man was the husband of Jovelyn's own manager, Gonzalez. This connection instantly propelled Gonzalez into the spotlight as a person of interest. She vehemently denied any involvement in the disappearance, claiming she hadn't even been aware of the alleged affair and therefore harbored no resentment toward Jovelyn. To a public already captivated by dark conspiracies, her denial seemed too convenient, and for many, it only deepened their suspicion. After the initial panic and speculation, investigators finally released new information. Contrary to the rumors, Jovelyn had in fact left the mall that evening. CCTV footage surfaced, showing her walking out and boarding a white multicab around 7:07 p.m., heading in the direction of Barangay Tagboros. This was a relief to some, proof they thought that Jovelyn was still alive when she left work. But the footage also complicated everything, because now the focus shifted away from the mall's so-called hidden basements and onto the city itself. Somewhere between Robinson's Mall and her home, Jovelyn disappeared. The family confirmed that the woman in the footage was indeed Jovelyn. They recognized her instantly. Yet still, doubts lingered. Because if she boarded that vehicle, then the next crucial step was obvious: find the driver. Police tracked him down, but what he told them was nothing. He couldn't remember her. He couldn't remember anyone. He explained that he picks up dozens of passengers daily, all of them wearing masks, faces blur together. Nothing stood out that evening. The police pressed him, showing him the video, reminding him of the time, the route, even the fact that there were 2 other male passengers with her. Still, the driver denied remembering. And maybe he was telling the truth. That lead went cold almost instantly. And with it, Jovelyn's trail seemed to vanish too. But then, just when it felt like investigators had hit a wall, a tip surfaced. On August 23rd, 18 days after Jovelyn vanished, police received a call. The caller wasn't a stranger, nor an anonymous informant. It was her own first cousin, Leobert das Mariñas. Not only that, he claimed to know where Jovelyn's body was. At 4 a.m., authorities moved quietly into an area called Pulang Lupa in Barangay Santa Lourdes, just 300 meters away from Jovelyn's home. There, hidden in the bush, they recovered skeletal remains. Beside them lay a black bag, a cell phone, ID cards, belongings later confirmed by the family to be Jovelyn's. But almost immediately, doubt set in, because something didn't make sense. Jovelyn had only been missing 3 weeks, yet the remains were nothing but bone. Forensic experts admitted what the family already suspected. Under normal conditions, that takes months, not weeks. Even in the humid Philippine heat, nature does not work that fast, and no one in Pulang Lupa had noticed the stench of decay, the odor that should have hung heavy over the area. To her family, it felt wrong, too clean, too sudden. When they were informed about the discovery, the items were already sealed and packed away. They weren't called to witness the recovery. They weren't even given the chance to see the remains with their own eyes. It left them with the suspicion that what the police found that morning might not have been Jovelyn at all. Still, the official story moved forward. A DNA test was ordered. The family waited. One resident reported something stranger still. On the afternoon of August 22nd, just hours before the discovery, a black pickup truck was seen parked near the site. Later that night, children spotted people moving through the area, flashing pen lights in the dark bush. Were they looking for something, or making sure something had been put in place? And at the center of all of it, the person who led police to the site, Leobert das Mariñas, is starting to act suspiciously. Not long after his tip, Leobert was accused of stabbing another cousin, Jovert Valdestamon. When questioned, he gave police an explanation. He had been provoked. Jovert, he said, accused him of what happened to Jovelyn. Furious, Leobert lashed out. But under pressure, his story shifted. He began to talk, and what he told police was darker than anyone expected. That Jovelyn's death was no accident, no random disappearance. It was planned, and it was carried out by family. According to Leobert, the plan had been simple. He and his cousin, Jovert Valdestamon, knew Jovelyn's routine. She always took the same route home. The idea was to catch her when she stepped off the multicab at Barangay Tagboros. That night, Leobert claimed he followed from behind, while Jovert waited further up the road, positioned in the direction she was walking. As Jovelyn neared, Leobert gave the signal. Jovert lunged. She struggled, of course she did, but he was stronger. He pulled her into a patch of tall grass, forcing her off the road, out of sight. From a distance, Leobert said he watched. He described her trying to break free, fighting against her cousin. But eventually, her body weakened. She went limp. It was then, he claimed, that Jovert undressed her and assaulted her. Leobert insisted he never touched her. He stayed back, only approaching when Jovert called him over. By then, he said, it was already too late. She wasn't moving. She was gone. He claimed he was only a lookout, that he was too afraid to intervene, too afraid to tell the police. He swore he never laid a hand on her. For Jovelyn's family, it was another nightmare. Because Leobert's story didn't just accuse Jovert, it also raised the question, how much of it was true? Even as the police moved forward with his statement, the Galleno family doubted him. Was Leobert just shifting blame, protecting himself? Or was this really what happened in the final moments of Jovelyn's life? And then, just as they were trying to process it, another twist would come, because days later, Lobert's story would change again. In the days after his confession, Lobert's behavior unsettled everyone. Family members described him as erratic, sometimes nervous and withdrawn, other times oddly confident when police were present. At times he seemed frightened, even catatonic. Then suddenly, around officers, he became talkative, almost eager. And soon, the explanation revealed itself. Because just days after claiming he was only a lookout, Lobert admitted something far darker. He had in fact participated in the essay and murder of his own cousin, Jovelyn. The news devastated her family. Until that moment, they hadn't believed he was capable of such brutality. Now, confronted with his words, they were forced to accept the possibility that blood ties had not protected Jovelyn. They had condemned her. Police placed him under arrest. But even then, the case was far from solid, because with Lobert came contradictions. The Galleno family pointed out glaring inconsistencies: the remains, the timeline. They questioned whether the bones in Pulang Lupa were even Jovelyn's, and they questioned whether Lobert's shifting story was the truth, or simply what police wanted to hear. Then, another layer. Lobert accused investigators themselves of corruption. He claimed officers had pressured him into confessing, even tortured him. At one point, he said he was offered money to take the blame. The police, of course, denied Lobert's allegations of torture and bribery. They stood by their investigation, and eventually he retracted his confession entirely. In the span of days, he had gone from tipster to witness to participant to self-proclaimed scapegoat. Each version contradicted the last, and with every shift, the truth of what happened to Jovelyn grew more uncertain. Meanwhile, investigators pushed forward with their own case against both Lobert and Jovelyn. By the end of August, the case had spiraled into a storm of contradictions. On August 30th, police announced the results of their DNA testing. The skeletal remains found at Pulang Lupa, they said, belonged to Jovelyn Galleno. Almost immediately, they filed complaints against both Lobert das Marinas and Jovelyn Valdestamon, charging them with assault and homicide. On paper, the case looked solved, but to Jovelyn's family, nothing about it felt right. They disputed the DNA findings, insisting the bones could not be her daughter's. They pointed again to decomposition. 3 weeks was not enough. They pointed to the absence of smell, the reports of animal bones in the same area, the strange sightings of vehicles and flashlights the night before the discovery. And they pointed to the police themselves, accusing investigators of mishandling the recovery, sealing items before the family could see them, withholding information until it was too late. For the Galleno family, the remains were not evidence. They were a question mark. So, while the police pressed charges, the family turned elsewhere. They had quietly reached out to the National Bureau of Investigation. They wanted an independent body to intervene, to verify the evidence, to cut through what they saw as layers of incompetence and possible corruption. By August 27th, an NBI team had arrived in Palawan. Within a day, they cordoned off Pulang Lupa, combing the site for evidence that might have been missed or perhaps ignored. They, too, announced plans to conduct DNA testing, their own test, separate from the police. And in a cryptic statement, the Bureau added that when they examined the remains, they were shown only the spinal column and rib cage. Online, the case became a storm. Some argued that the skeletal remains were never hers at all, that the police had staged the discovery to end the case. Others went further, accusing investigators themselves of complicity, though no one could ever agree on the motive. A few pointed to Jovelyn's professors, others to shadowy figures no one could name. The internet fractured the case into dozens of theories, each more disturbing than the last. And at the center of it all, the Galleno family stood firm. The truth was still out there. But while the public speculated, the cousins at the heart of the case, Lobert and Jovelyn, were telling two very different stories. Lobert's story was already unstable, shifting from witness to participant to scapegoat. But through it all, one detail remained constant. He blamed Jovelyn Valdestamon as the true mastermind behind Jovelyn's abduction and death. But Jovelyn denied everything. He told investigators that on the night Jovelyn disappeared, He wasn't stalking the streets of Tagbaros. He was at a construction site, working. His foreman and co-workers backed him up, vouching for his presence there. It was, he claimed, a solid alibi. And he had another explanation for the conflict between them. According to Jovelyn, he and Lobert had argued over the phone the night before the remains were found. Jovelyn had accused him of doing nothing to help the family, of staying quiet while their cousin was missing. The fight escalated, words were exchanged, and soon after, Lobert accused him of murder. To Jovelyn, this wasn't a confession, it was revenge. Who was lying? Who was telling the truth? And if the remains really were Jovelyn's, who put them there? On September 15, 2022, the National Bureau of Investigation delivered the news the Galleno family had dreaded. Their independent DNA analysis was complete. The skeletal remains found at Pulang Lupa were Jovelyn's. For the police, it was vindication, proof that their investigation had been on the right track all along. The case, in their eyes, was forensically closed. Lobert Dasmariñas and Jovelyn Valdestamon were formally charged. The case against them, however, is not widely seen as conclusive. It's because the entire story of Jovelyn's abduction and murder rested on a single unstable source, the confession of Lobert Dasmariñas, and the motive was unclear. On September 14th, that confession was put to the test. Lobert arrived at the NBI office to undergo a polygraph examination. He was scared, requesting that the media be kept out. His father was confused, questioning the validity of the statement his son had signed under police custody without family or his own lawyer present. The Galleno family was also there, waiting in a painful limbo. When asked about the police's DNA results, Jovelyn's mother, Jovelyn, could only say, "I feel nothing." She held out a sliver of hope, telling reporters she still didn't know if her daughter was alive or dead. Finally, they released the results of the lie detector tests. According to the police, Lobert showed signs of deception, but not Jovelyn. Then, on November 24th, 2022, the entire case just fell apart. In a stunning move, the prosecutor's office dropped all charges. Just like that, the prosecutor stated that the evidence gathered by the police and the NBI had miserably failed to establish probable cause. The reason? Lobert's confession, the very heart of the prosecution, was obtained under duress, and without it, there was nothing left. No witness, no DNA linking the men. The skeletal remains could not prove sexual assault. The garments found had no foreign DNA profile. The corroborating evidence was found through an uncounseled confession and was therefore tainted. The prosecutor even denied a request for carbon-14 dating of the bones, seeing it as a defense tactic, while simultaneously upholding the DNA tests that confirmed the remains were Jovelyn's. Just like that, the only two suspects ever named were free. The case was not just closed, it was dismissed. So, where does that leave us? The DNA says the bones were Jovelyn's. The law says no one can be held responsible. The police say the case is solved. And the truth? Still missing. As of July 2025, rumors still swirl online. Some even claim Jovelyn is alive. But the fact remains, she never came home.